So once again, good morning, colleagues. My name is Opondo. I work at the Environmental Compliance Institute, which also happens to be coordinating the Secretariat of the East African Network for Environmental Compliance and Enforcement, ENIS. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to this webinar, which is part of our capacity building series. If you remember well, for some of you who've been part of this, around October last year, we hosted one that focused on air quality legislation and enforcement in East Africa. Today, our focus is on biodiversity and ecosystems conservation, being one of the priority areas that we work around. And therefore, we will be able to share information, experiences from between ourselves, but also be able to hear from an expert who will be giving us an expert keynote presentation today. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. David Ongare, who is the Director, Compliance and Enforcement at the National Environment Management Authority of Kenya, who is going to give a brief opening speech, after which then we will welcome our keynote presenter. Just as a matter of housekeeping, I'll request that all of us keep our microphones on mute for now while others are speaking. And then we can also use the chat box to ask any questions that we may have ahead of the Q&A session. Plus, for purposes of keeping records of who is here, kindly just use the chat box to type in, your name, your organization, and email address. That would be helpful for future contacts. So thank you very much, and welcome, Mr. Ongare.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Good morning, colleagues. It's good to be able to participate in this webinar forum. I think the most important thing from where I sit is that we keep the dialogues going within the region, and especially now that I see most of our colleagues from the region are on board, so that these collaborations can enable us to move forward with this environmental agenda as one, because most of us have shared ecosystems. We also have more or less similar challenges around the region. And therefore, I encourage that this be one of the platforms that probably facilitates the collaborations within our institutions in the region. The topic of this meeting is of particular importance with regard to biodiversity, because despite being an important resource and our countries have been ratified various environmental agreements, multilateral ones, we continue to experience challenges, basically mostly moved by urbanization and other interests. Case in point is now the amendments to the Forest Act we saw in Kenya, which seeks to probably weaken the systems for excision of forests, which are important ecosystems that house important biodiversity. So I'm looking forward to getting the insights from our colleagues also to see how we can also strengthen our practice here within Kenya and also within my institution. So without giving a very long speech, we are very glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to some fruitful deliberations on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that precise statement. Just to let you know, ENIS covers the East African nations of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. And in today's forum, we have confirmations from all these nations. I see Gabriel from Burundi is already on. Well, feel very much welcome, and we will get the other colleagues joining as we go along. So at this point in time, allow me to welcome our keynote speaker, who is going to be Mr. Fred Onyai. Fred works at the National Environment Management Authority of Uganda as the monitoring and evaluation manager. He's been in the public service sector and in the environment sector for over 25 years. So he has long-standing experience in this. He is one of the key negotiators for Uganda for the United Nations Biodiversity Convention, as well as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And Fred also happens to be a peer reviewer at the Convention on Biodiversity Secretariat for the national biodiversity strategies and action plans. So with this experience, he is a perfect fit to speak to us today. So Fred, without much ado, I would like to welcome you to give us your presentation. Feel free to share your screen and just take it up from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, the fraternity of INIS. Jerry has already made elaborate presentation, introduction about me. For that matter, I will not repeat what he has said, but I appreciate whatever he has said about me. And I am so thrilled to this morning to talk to our colleagues across East African community countries, and of course I know it is beyond ESC. And therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to take us through really what he has already actually stated. And I hope all of us are able to see the slides or the screen that I'm sharing right now. It's a tough one to talk about policies and the legal framework across the region. Take into account that we are talking about different states, yet within one community. But I'll make an attempt to really show the strengths and the weakness of this policy and legal frameworks in the region. But before that, we shall look at the objectives of the webinar, why INIS decided to come up with this webinar, so that at the end of the presentation, we know that whether we have achieved the objectives or not. We shall quickly run through the background of biodiversity in East Africa, basically looking at the characteristics and the values, benefits, we look at the pressure and status, we look at the key threats, we look at the issues, we look at the legal frameworks, look at the key achievements related to policies and laws, and then some proposed strategies, conclusions, and recommendations. I'll request Jerry to be taking down the comments in the chat box so that it takes us through the questions or the compliments after the presentation. So why did the INIS come up with this webinar? One is provide a forum for information exchange on the threats to biodiversity and conservation in East Africa. We should be expecting information on the threats. What are the key threats of biodiversity ecosystem in East Africa? Then we shall also explore and share experiences and the best practices and strategies for effective biodiversity and ecosystem policies and legislative frameworks in East Africa. The second objective is actually for all of us. We should be able to share our experience and the best practices in the respective countries, while we should also be able to look at the strategies that we are going to propose or already being proposed by ESC, because you need to be aware that already ESC Secretariat is spearheading the development of the regional biodiversity and action plan, RBSAP. And it's already in advanced stage. So some of the proposed strategies that we're going to look at in this particular presentation are already in the draft. So it's a chance for you to have a look at this now and give your views so that before we finalize the RBSAP, then already we shall have got input from INIS. So I think this particular webinar is very time that will make us look at these proposed strategies and in the end sub. Now, in terms of background, first of all, we know that biodiversity is very fundamental in the life support system. Is the basis for our survival. And secondly, we know that biodiversity includes diversity at the genetic level, which I think for this particular webinar we may not be able to discuss. We're not going to discuss genes here, but the diversity at species level, we shall be able to talk about some species in East Africa, and the diversity at ecosystem level. This is according to CB 1992. So when we talk about biodiversity, they're basically in levels or in components. Component one is the lowest level, the genes, second level, the species, and other than the ecosystems. Some literature will talk about the population, but it's all about these three biological levels. And we are also aware that East Africa as a region is well endowed with the biodiversity, which is very important for local livelihoods, national and regional economies across East African community countries. Now, we also know that the East Africa hosts a quarter of the world's mammal species. So you can imagine we take 25% of the world mammal species. And we have got the 5 key physiographic zones that include the coastal belt along Indian Ocean, the extensive plains and plateaus, the highlands, like the Kenya highlands, in Kenya, of course, the Kigezi Islands in Uganda, and other islands, the islands in Burundi and Rwanda. Then we've got the Lake Victoria Basin and the Great Rift Valley. So these physiographic zones automatically also define the kind of biodiversity we have. So for example, the marine aquatic ecosystems are linked to the Indian Ocean, the inland rivers, the lakes and the wetlands. East Africa is gifted to have both fresh and marine water systems. And of course, the marines include the mangrove forest, the coral reefs, the seagrass beds, the offshore continental shelf, and the deep sea pelvic ecosystem. Meanwhile, the terrestrial ecosystem are dominated by forests, woodlands, and rangelands, or called grasslands and arid lands. And the national vegetation of East Africa was composed of the equatorial tropical rainforest, the savanna vegetation, which takes the majority of the East African community vegetation, mainly the savanna woodland, the savanna grassland, the semi-desert, like northern and Kenya and northeastern Uganda, the montane mangrove, and the swamp vegetation, the wetlands. And the dominant type of vegetation in East Africa is called, I would say savanna, but also we need to take into account that the East African region has got a variety of forests that support the wealth of biological diversity. The forests include the tropical and subtropical forests, the plantations, the Miambo woodlands, all these are what the storage of biodiversity wealth. And one thing you need to understand that because of the human activities, most of the East African region has got what we call secondary or modified vegetation because of human influence, basically agriculture, settlements, and urbanization. As we shall see, this will be one of the major threats to biodiversity in East Africa. And the terrestrial ecosystem are further divided into tropical, which you have seen in terms of hectare, the tropical moist deciduous forest, the tropical dry forest, the tropical shrubland, the tropical mountain systems, and the tropical arid lands. These are the terrestrial subdivisions of our vegetation. And all these are defining various species of plants and animals that are within the biodiversity. Meanwhile, the ecosystem marine includes what we have already mentioned in terms of the mammals, in terms of the birds, in terms of the reptiles, in terms of amphibians. This is a very rich ecosystem in the East African coast, basically Tanzania and Kenya. And therefore, you will realize that in terms of species distribution, you will see how much Burundi has, you will see how much Kenya has, and you see Rwanda, you see South Sudan. But what we need to say here that this distribution of species, most of them will include species that will plants and animals. Some are threatened, some are endemic, as we shall see in the future. And for record purpose, you'll find that, for example, Kenya has got the highest number of species among all the 5 East African states, followed by Uganda, Tanzania. So this is the kind of the species richness. This is what called the species richness of an ecosystem or of a country. So the previous existing we have mentioned across the East African region have got this bank of species, as already stated in the statistics. And then in terms of, and then if you group this into protected areas in East Africa, because all the banks of species can be grouped, they are conserved. You know, they are, in terms of nature-based solutions, there are 3 levels of conservation. No, not levels, but 3 actions when you talk about nature-based solutions. One, the first action is protection. You protect, that is strict access and use through a legal system. The other one is restoration, where we restore the degraded ecosystems and to restore the species and their values. Then the third one is what you call sustainable management, where we wisely use the existing ecosystems for human survival. So these 3 actions are what comprise nature-based solutions. Now we are going to look at the first one, which East African community countries have started from the colonial period, the protection. So we find that if you take Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, you find that we have got over 1,776 protected species, which include those 186 are very strict species. These are according to IUCN, that is a kind of a category of no-go area. They're supposed to be strictly protected. And of course, beside East African protected areas cover 80% of the ecoregion. So that means that most of these are protected. Now, in terms of the distribution, you will see that you will see that in terms of distribution, therefore, you see Tanzania, which is the third in the volume or the richness of species, or the number of species. Tanzania so is the third. The first is Kenya, followed by Uganda and Tanzania. But in terms of the protected areas, Tanzania is more rich. Tanzania has got more protected areas than Kenya and Uganda. But now it is the reverse, or it's Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda in terms of number of protected areas. Then followed by other countries, Burundi, Rwanda, and South Sudan. So Tanzania seems to be doing very well in terms of protection, and that is very encouraging. That's by gazetting. We don't know the nature of the conservation areas individually. And in terms of the shared transparent ecosystems, we have got the key ones. We've got forests, like Sango Bay, between the Uganda and Tanzania. We have got savanna wildlife landscapes, which are like Serengeti, between Tanzania and Kenya and Tanzania. And then we have got Akagera National Park between Rwanda and Tanzania. Then we've got the mountains and the hills as the shared ecosystems, like Mount Elgon between Uganda and Kenya. We've got the coastal marine system between Tanzania and Kenya. We've got the rivers, between the number of rivers. We've got lakes, we've got wetlands. All these are shared transparent ecosystems. That's where now the gist of the matter is. And that's why the policies and the legal frameworks need to have a niche. They need to see how they're going to deliver in terms of management of the shared transparent ecosystems. And then this will now take us to what are now the values of biodiversity in East Africa. This look conventional. I mean, they look something which is all over the world, but they're specific in certain areas within this African region. And we know that as an ecological system or an ecosystem, there are services that they render. We have got the provisioning, the regulating, the supporting, and the cash flow services. Therefore, we have got ecological benefits, we have got human health benefits, we've got economic benefits, we've got cash flow benefits. And this, we can say that 70% of our population in East African region get direct local livelihood benefits. And then the other national and regional economic development. Now, in terms of distribution, these are the quantified values, and Kenya is leading in East Africa in terms of such information, because when you go through the reports by NEMA Kenya and the Biodiversity Atlas of Kenya, find that they were given the dollar values of most of their ecosystems. And this is one of the gaps. that we have in East Africa, that most of our ecosystems have got no monetary values, and therefore planning and mainstreaming and integrating them into the national development framework becomes very difficult. Can bring them into the national accounting system becomes very difficult. So I think we need to ask Guinness, we need to maybe to dig further, see how is Kenya managing to have all these ecosystems valued, as you can see on the screen. So that means that they have gone ahead of other East African countries in terms of economic valuation of their ecosystems in dollar or Kenya shilling values. And then the other benefits, of course, are not only economic, we have got the issue of food security, that's for sure, about our food security, about agriculture. We have got 90%, about 90% of our population, especially in Uganda, depends on biomass energy. And but there in Uganda, the industrial energy, within industrial energy, biomass takes 80%. Now within the household energy, and that's the domestic energy, the biomass takes about 95%. That is a very big dependence and a benefit, but it's also a threat. Later we will see that. And then we have the areas around the tropical and moist forests are favorable for plantation agriculture, settlement, and urban development. Look at cities like Kampala, Nairobi, Kigali, then they have a number of tropical forests, and they are good for settlement. And much as also urbanization and the solution also is a threat. And then look at the other positive picture of having the plantation agriculture within the Kenya Highlands and other parts of East African countries. And then the tropical forest and the wetlands enhance climate and local climate modification and carbon suppression. Removals and sinks of carbon. For example, in Uganda, biomass and soil contribute to 15% and 85% of carbon storage sinks respectively. Meaning biomass takes 50%, the soil scientifically store more carbon. But these soils are better, they have got better health when they're within forest ecosystem system. So the forest ecosystem. When the forests are removed, or when there's a deforestation, the soils are exposed to erosion and other forms of degradation. And therefore the soil will also lose their capacity, their health capacity to store and use carbon. So soils are also connected to forest. The savanna vegetation are very important for basically for livestock and tourism industries. To bear witness for the savanna areas in East Africa, most of them you find other ranching. We're having ranches, we are having wildlife conservation, and other livestock industries. The marine and freshwater biodiversity, for sure, you are aware that there is fishing tourism. And when you go to along within the coastal cities, the leading economies apart from fishing is tourism. Some biodiversities are also used as herbal medicines and therapeutics, like Xanthoxylum gleti and the Wabugya of Uganda is used for Covidex. We are aware of the Covidex that has been still being tested in Uganda, but I think now we are using it in most of the treatment for COVID in Uganda and the East African community. Government of Uganda has already pronounced that Ministry of Health should take it for clinical tests so that to use as for treatment now in hospitals. So this is some of the uses for the biodiversity. These pictures just show the various uses. Some of you, people like Opondo, who are near Lake Victoria, see how you can enjoy fish. Those who are enjoying wildlife, some are enjoying fruits and horticulture. So biodiversity is our livelihood. So but then we need to talk about the threats. The threats here, we're talking about the habitat, the habitat and ecosystem loss, biodiversity loss. When we talk about the threat, we are specific to the losses that are within the sites. So for the first and foremost, the loss of forest cover and plant species. You will see in this data, all the East African countries between the year from 90s to 2000s have lost forest cover. For example, you see what Uganda has lost, you see what Burundi has lost, you can see what Rwanda has lost, you can see what South Sudan has lost, and the other two countries. So we are saying that for the last 20 or so years, none of the East African communities significant is gaining forest cover. I know, like Uganda started gaining, but this is by 20. This is the data of 2021. That's what data we got in 2021. But and the gaining is by then not from the natural vegetation. We are not restoring naturally. These are because of the private sector participation in the plantations. And for us, people in the area of conservation, much as we're looking at development too, we believe that development will be better if we encourage conservation of the natural forest, But now here in Uganda, yes, we increase the forest cover, but most of them are the exotic species, which do not, yes, they add scientifically, they have got some values in biodiversity integrity. But in terms of the total value that we are looking for total value of biodiversity in Uganda, I think we are losing some values because the natural species are getting lost. So forest loss is one of the key, one of the key threats in the habitat biodiversity in Uganda, in East Africa. The other one is the loss of wetlands and related biodiversity species and the values. We know what wetlands are meant for, but we have got wetlands that are used like in urban water system. Wetlands are used for water supply. Urban system like for waste management. Wetlands are used for drought control. Wetlands have got so many ecological and socioeconomic values, but they are getting lost. You see the example like in Uganda, in the 90s we were at 13%. Now here we're talking of less than 10. Actually now right next we're less than 10%. So the issue at hand is now that loss of wetlands and the species is also a very big issue in the East African community. And it cuts across from South Sudan, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi. The other is the threatened and endangered vulnerable species. We have got especially the big mammals. A number of them, as listed here, are getting lost. And yet, these are the species that are attracting tourism in the region. And you will appreciate that a Mzungu will fly all the way from the temperate countries to come and see just one lion in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Burundi, in Sudan, or in Rwanda, or the mountain gorilla, for example. People are spending dollars to come and watch them. The next generation may not see these animals, and we may not get the future revenue from these animals since they're threatened and endangered. And I think you will see some of the factors that lead to their threats. The other one is which we tend not to talk about much is the endemic species that need strict protection. We have got a number of them: birds, animals, and plants. A number of them. And for example, in terms of vertebrates, a number of them within the coast, the marine environment is losing a number of vertebrates that are very important in the ecosystem integrity. So some of these endemic species needs to be protected because now they are at the verge of being extinct. Another important area is a loss of agro biodiversity. You know, we tend to talk about natural ecosystems. We don't tend to talk about the agro biodiversity, including the domestic animals. See, we're also losing, for example, those of you who are from maize growing areas, we have lost the traditional or the indigenous maize species that used to do very well. But a cob of maize is having like 16 lines, and you know it has got it's multicolored, you know. And you know, you will see this. You see, first it's attractive, it's sweet, it's nice, but now all these are getting lost because of first of all the habitats within the agroecological zones are changing, and once habitats are changing, there's a soil productivity issue that comes on board, and now some of these species that cannot grow in the current soil conditions, therefore we lose them. And then the loss of medicinal and the therapeutic species. We are discovering we are not discovering more medicines from the more herbal medicine, but as the herbs are getting lost, shall we sustain this discovery? So we need to think twice. And more so, for example, in Uganda now, because of COVID and because of the plants that we're using for COVID, there's now a rush for that particular plant. Everybody wants to go for it. So the plant will become also a threatened species very soon if it's not well conserved, it's not well sustained. So it means that the demand for herbal medicine is now increasing because of the supplements that we are advertising everywhere, but we are not sure where the source will be sustained. And then that should bring us now to what's the policy framework to manage some of these threats. First of all East African countries have got constitutions that provide for nature and environment protection, the rights to and duties for clean and healthy environment. There are sector policies and laws in all these countries which focus on segments of biodiversity, like forestry, wetlands, environment, land, water resources, agriculture, all that. They've got sector policies and laws in all these East African countries. We have got the national development frameworks, which are like national visions, the national development plan strategies, which all focus on priorities that include nature and protection and environment conservation. So in terms of individual setup, segmented setup within the ESC, all these countries are governed by constitutions, by policies, by laws, by regulations, by standards, by guidelines. This all form what we call the legal framework, the legal regime and policy framework. But then at ESC level, we have got the ESC Treaty that under Article 111 that is provided for natural resources with the focus on adoption of a common strategy for environment and natural resources management, cooperation and adopting common policies, laws, and the capacity building among others. While Article 112 is focusing on common policies and with special strategy controlling transparent land, water, air pollution, integration of the environment, the development activities among others. Now, Article 112 is the one which provides, which has given us provision for the development of the regional biodiversity strategy and action plan, RBSA. So based on this, the ESC Secretariat is with the participation of the technocrats and experts from the ESC countries, I think the consultancy input, we are developing the RBSA. And then the ESC also provide 114 focus on focusing on joint and efficient management and sustainable integration of natural resources with the ESC countries by taking measures to conserve the natural resources, cooperating in management, looking at environmental regulation, adopting common regulations for protecting shared and aquatic resources. We saw the various shared transparent ecosystems. So Article 114 provides for that. That means the legal provision at the regional level exists, while Article 114, subsection 2, is providing policy that relate to forest and retail resources. So meaning that this specifically looking at the forest, the policies on forest, how do we manage forests in East Africa? But also we have got the ESC Protocol on Environment and Natural Resources. This protocol is, among others, to enhance cooperation for efficient and sustainable management of environment in the region. Now, the RBSAP 2 anchors on this protocol. Unfortunately, not all member states have signed this protocol, and therefore commencing it for the whole region becomes a problem. So we believe that the legal arm of ESC at the Secretariat is following that up with the member states, because it is very important that the protocol takes off so that by the time we are getting on with the RBSAP, it is legally anchored. And also, last but not least, all these member countries, ESC countries, except South Sudan, have ratified the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, which focus on the concern. First of all, we should note that South Sudan has an accession to the convention. That means they're not entirely out of the convention, they're within the convention, but they have not ratified it. They're at the level of accession. Now, this particular convention focuses on 1, conservation of biological diversity. 2, is looking at sustainable use, and 3 is looking at equitable access and equitable sharing. But then we have got 2 protocols that complement this convention. The first protocol is it's Nagoya Protocol on the ABS. ABS is access to benefit sharing of the resources, biological resources or biodiversity resources, and that one is the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. So this I would say are the legal, the policy and legal frameworks that are governing biodiversity conservation in East Africa. Of course, we have got a number of them. Some of them are still within pipeline within the ESC. We have got bills, for example, in the air quality. We have got bills on plastics management. We are told the protocol is yet to be signed by all member states. So all this, I think, can sum up what we call the legal regime for biodiversity conservation in East Africa. Now, what are the key achievements? Of course, because the current policy framework and the legal regimes in East Africa, the both national and the regional regimes have given us and have provided for other sector policies in the country. At least by success, every member state has got a sector policy and laws. Number two, the institutions, the environment management has been institutionalized in the ministries, departments, and agencies, local governments, and the academia. So the institutions are involved in managing these aspects of the policy and legal regime. But also mainstreaming of biodiversity to some extent has taken place in most of these countries. So the issue, we found that maybe the development plan has got provision for biodiversity, but the budget is not prioritized. So we have got some contradictions in the area of mainstreaming, which we need to work on. There have been attempts to develop joint common laws. And I told about the bills, for example. The protocol is there to be signed by all. There are bills on management of plastics and air quality, among others. But also there are attempts to develop special strategy as provided by the treaty, and that is the Regional Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, RBSAM. And then there are also establishment of common organizations that are used for managing transparent and shared ecosystems and natural sources, like the Lake Victoria Basin Commission. We also have some attempts and achievements in joint programs and projects like Lake Victoria Environment Management Program, LAVEN. So these are some of the success stories that we can list. But also, we know that there's a public awareness and education programs that have come on board as a result of some of these policy and legal frameworks. We still have regional networking through the multilateral environmental agreements, the convention, like and other blocks like the AU 2063, Agenda 2063, the AMSEN, and the IGAD. All these are because we have got some MOUs, we have got some policies, we have got some laws that make us work together. And also at times we negotiate together, but then we do. ESC is not a negotiating bloc at the moment. And that's another challenge we have. AU does it, we have got African group negotiations, but we don't have our own. Maybe the East African Secretariat will see how does ESC become an negotiating bloc like other regional blocs within Africa. Now, what are the legal gaps so that the policy and the legal pitfall gaps? One thing is that the respective national policies are segmented. They're not coordinated, they're not synergized, they are contrary to the provision of the treaty. So we are not synergized. Secondly, the policy frameworks do not consider and harmonize the land tenure and land use issues. A case in Uganda where land belongs to the people. How do you conserve the biodiversity for all when Fred has got his own land? So we still have some contradictions within ESC in terms of land management. Yet land is a domain for biodiversity survival. And then we've got inadequate policy and legal frameworks to address particular issues, for example, by invasive species, by technology and by safety. Most of East African countries are struggling with by safety because of inadequate legal provision. If this was at ESC level, it would be a different story, possibly would be a different story. Then the delayed signing of the ESC Protocol on environment and natural resource management is another pitfall that we need to look at. There are other pitfalls that relate to management, planning and management gaps. Now, colleagues, this slide about pitfalls now and the gaps is giving us now the difference. Where are they all policy related? Now, the previous slide you can see, we are all looking about where the policies and the laws have not worked. But when it comes to the next slide, we're saying, no, it's not only the policies that have not worked. Also, we have got gaps in planning and management. For example, the inadequate integration is a planning failure. Inadequate mechanism for joint coordinated and synergized management is a planning failure. Inadequate financing is a planning failure. Low budgeting for biodiversity, lack of prioritization is a planning failure. Low staffing and limited number of specialists is a planning failure. Weak coordination and synergies among the Rio Conventions. The Rio Conventions are supposed to work different, but for one, UNCBD, UNCCC, and UNCDD. All these are focused on biodiversity, the focus on ecosystems. So why can't we make them? Why can't we have a kind of a structure within ESC that will make us work together, including Agenda 23 and Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030? So these are planning and management gaps that are provided in the laws, but then we have failed to implement them. Then we have got the demographic liabilities and anthropogenic or human practices, which are now different from planning and the management gaps. These are now the growing population, for example, is a problem in the ecosystem, giving pressure. Agriculture is giving a lot of pressure, especially the commercial agriculture. Even the subsistence agriculture is also a problem because of the poor land use practices by our peasant farmers. Dependence on the biomass energy, as I said earlier, is a very big issue. Human settlements and urbanization is a big problem. Industrialization and pollution, especially within Lake Victoria sub-region, so the Lake Victoria region, and the coastal one where we've got the industrial centers within the cities, Nairobi, Kampala, find that this pollution, air pollution, that's a problem to the biodiversity, including human beings. Then the issue of the ecosystem degradation, that's deforestation, for example, water degradation is a problem because it's a bad practice. Uncontrolled wildfires, especially by hunters and the farmers. In Uganda, the period of end of November to end of February is a big problem with the fire. Right now, if you look at the live fire platform, which is I think for all can serve it. You will see Uganda right now and Kenya are leading in terms of fire incidents, that is what we call fire alerts. And you know what happened in Kenya possibly this week, where we have wildfires trying to endanger our forests in Kenya. But in Uganda, likewise, we have the savannas are in trouble. Poaching and illegal trade in game products, international trade and movements are associated with the waste, chemicals, and invasive alien species. When you travel from Mombasa, especially from Kericho up to Uganda, up to Jinja, or even beyond up to maybe Kigali, find that there's some particular weeds that are along the streets, along the highways. And now they're not invasive, they're not going to the gardens, the farms, simply because some of them come with the grains in the trucks and they're invasive. So they come from other countries. So this is a problem. And then we have got an issue to do with the governance gaps, inadequate leadership and political commitment. We don't prioritize, our leaders tend not to prioritize biodiversity. We're prioritizing road construction, hospitals, education, we have infrastructure and the economy, but we don't know that the economy depends on biodiversity. Weak institutions like corruption, for example, low capacity, weak enforcement of the legal frameworks is a governance issue, though it's also a planning and finance, a planning and management failure, weak interstate coordination, the governance issue. Some states cannot come together because they've got a different ideology, political ideology, so they can't come together. Environmental injustice, especially encroachment and depletion of ecosystems by the rich and the powerful ones, at the expense or disadvantage of the poor segment of the population, like especially the women. And then that talk about the gender-based unfairness and social inequity, access and control of resources. Biodiversity, for example, ecosystem, a land controlled by few men or individuals at the expense of the women, children, the youth, and the person with disabilities and the elderly. This is environmental injustice, which is not caused by lack of law or by the failure of course, but it's caused by our governance gaps. And then there's inadequate inclusion and participation of other key stakeholders, like the private sector is not working. If you compare to private sector within the EU, the private sector within other blocks, I think in the ESC, we need to involve the private sector, we need to involve the civil society, we need to involve the media to make us communicate to the public. We need to involve the public itself in planning and the management of the ecosystem. And then other issues, of course, poverty is a big issue. Poverty, which enhances the vicious cycle of environmental division and poverty, where the poor depend solely on land and environmental resources that are degraded and depleted for further environmental degradation. that leads to low productivity, reduced livelihoods, and therefore more issues to do with the poverty. So it's the cycle within the poor community. But also climate change and its impacts are also cause more disasters like droughts, floods, and landslides. These are now beyond governance, they are beyond management, they are beyond policies. They are now disasters. But also the COVID lockdowns affected especially enforcement personnel. The enforcement personnel could not move, and therefore degradation got accelerated. Like in Uganda, poaching increased because the wardens could not deploy personnel because of the movement of control movements of people and the vehicles. So the poachers took it. It was now for them to eat. It was now what they call RA. They just went on rampage. And then conflicts and insecurity affect operations of the enforcement team. You cannot go to a place which is insecure because the enforcement of the law or the policy you can't. Like now, when we go to some other parts of the East African community where we have got, I'm not going to mention here for security purpose again, but then we have got areas where really you cannot access in terms of enforcement. Inadequate joint research and innovations. Compared to other blocks, ESC is still limited in terms of research and innovations, which could make us move together. What should be done? First of all, in terms of strategies, I have already said, based on the country situation analysis, ESC Secretariat has coordinated the ESC member states, the technocrats, the distributed focal points and the focal points of the ministries. We are developing what you call the RBSAP. I've talked about it. With 3 goals: to reduce direct pressure on regional biodiversity and enhance its capacity to provide benefits, safeguard ecosystem species and genetic diversity. Remember, diversity is in 3 levels: ecosystem, species, and genes. So here we are. Let's strengthen the regional biodiversity management capacity and cooperation. For example, the genetic diversity will be dealt better if we enhance scientific cooperation among the member states and beyond, and therefore research. Now, I would like to say that all these 3 goals have got targets, and the targets have got action for implementation. And therefore, we've got what we call the action plan. Is there part of the strategy? So some of the proposals we're going to mention below are already parts or will be covered by the strategy. And one of them is the issue of execution of policies, strategies within the common agreed principles. We need to have principles of operation, principles of working together as a block: cooperation, sustainable development, fictional principle, preventive principle, political-based principle, sector integration, synergies, ecosystem-based approach, participation, and inclusiveness. All these principles need to be in our policy and law so that we work as a team. We need to establish joint mechanism for mainstreaming biodiversity, especially when it comes to the issue of economic valuation of ecosystems for the purpose of integrating them in the national accounting system, so that we can calculate what you call the cost-benefit analysis can be done, and we can calculate how much we are losing or gaining in terms of the GDPs of these countries. In then institutional capacity enhancement through staffing, scaling, equipping, tooling, and financing at all levels in this government. Promotional partnerships, networking, technical, and such cooperation. I've already mentioned that. We need to do that within and beyond ESC bloc, within and outside Africa. And then we need to harmonize our policy, legal regimes. We need to move them all together. We need to have joint policies and enforcement. We need to have enforcement. Can you have a joint? Now we are what INIS. How can INIS enhance joint enforcement? This is some challenge we have. Governance. How do we ensure that there's leadership, commitment, accountability, transparency at all levels within ESC? How do we harmonize and coordinate the Rio Conventions and other related obligations? We need to promote scientific and technical and political cooperation to complement governance, to complement science and innovations. We need to have a joint mobilization of financing. Member states tend to work individually to look for money, but now we're going for the shared and transparent management. So that means we need to share responsibilities and move as a team to mobilize resources to get investment through joint resource mobilization for the region. This is just an example of how the 3 conventions we look at. If you look at the convention if you look at CBD and the convention on the climate change, apart from enhancing ecosystem health and integrity, and at the same time ensuring climate resilience within the UNFCCC, we look at the forests for carbon sinks and removals. So it means that these two can work together. And if we invest in forest, we invest in both conventions. Likewise, between CBD and the convention on a drought, we are looking at sustainable land and soil productivity for health ecosystems and human well-being within the UNCDT. But also we are looking at ecosystem health. So through sustainable land management activities, rather interventions, we're able to conserve the biodiversity, the ecosystem, the forest, the wetland, the water resources. We're able to conserve them for soil productivity at the same time, also productivity of the biodiversity. And therefore, we can work through SLM, we can work and enhance this. The same between UNCCC and the UNCDD, where we talk about soil health for carbon storage and use by plants and plants like forests. So if we are going to enhance soil productivity in CDD, we're enhancing climate resilience, but we need to invest in the soil health. Because the soil health, I told you, in Uganda, the soil takes 85% of our carbon sinks and removals. So if we could come up with indicators, come up with the strategies, come up with the mechanisms to ensure that having one secretariat. I know at a global level, that discussion cannot come in, but you remember for chemicals, they're already discussing and they're already having only one COP. That is the Rotterdam, Basel, Stockholm, now that they're adding Minamata on Mercury. So chemicals are coming together to form now that one secretariat. I know for the CBD conventions to take, for the Rio conventions may take time, but at the ESC level, can't we make some innovations so that we move as a team? So in conclusion, we're saying this policy exists within East Africa, and there are some achievements, but they're not adequate enough for efficient and effective management of the environment in the region because of other factors, governance, planning and management, and other issues. But besides, internally within the policies, there are some pitfalls. The policy and laws, there are pitfalls. Besides, I've said that, but there's need for coordinated synergetic management of the environment, and therefore the policy needs to be brought together. And therefore, I could repeat therefore and therefore, that the RB-SAP should be finalized for implementation. Because the RB-SAP has got a number of interventions, including joint resource mobilization and capacity building. And ESC can, remember, ESC as a block should see how we can integrate all the MEAs and the other obligations. So that, especially the MEAs that are about conservation of biodiversity, chemicals management, climate change, and waste management. All these are interrelated. So if its MEAs could be coordinated and managed in a synergetic manner, I believe that we shall go further than this. Thank you very much for listening. And through Jerry, I think we can now get through the various comments and questions. Asante.
Thank you very much, Fred, for that quite informative, insightful, and I must say, very interesting presentation. So at this time, colleagues, I want to open it up for questions, answers, comments. I have, I think, 2 already on the chat box. Please feel free to use that if you prefer that option. You can also use the reactions icon to raise your hand, then I'll give you a chance. And quickly, Fred, before I take comments and questions from colleagues, I would like to just throw one question which is relevant to what you just spoke about in your last slides. In terms of coordination between the various multilateral environmental agreements and creating synergies at international and national and regional levels, I would just like you to say something. What do you think about the state of coordination of these MEAs at national level? Because oftentimes you find that like the focal points in our various countries could be in different institutions. You find one in Ministry of Environment, another one at the Environment Agency, another one at the Ministry of Agriculture, and a lot of times the various focal points and even the legislations and policies do not speak very well to each other. So what's your take on this?
Yes, thank you. Before I forget, there's a question. I'll come to you as Jerry. There's a comment on I see on the chat box on the media. How can the media be used to enhance biodiversity conservation? You know, conservation is not about only investing in protection or otherwise in the real values on the ground, but it's also about ensuring that information is reachable, information is accessible. And one of the areas to ensure that the public gets information is to use the fourth state. The fourth state is the media. Now, the media helps us, one, in creating awareness, empowering the population. In some areas where the other state, the government, the civil society, the private sector are not doing much, or they're doing the contrary, the media becomes the fourth eye. And the fourth eye for the public. So the media will inform the public. You're aware that some policies have come up as that of media. For example, the way the media has covered the menace caused by the plastics in ESC, in Uganda commonly called the carrier bags, the plastic carrier bags called the polyethylene carrier bags called Kavera. The media took it as a niche, and somehow most countries in East Africa have taken it up. So the media can inform the population on a problem that is occurring, but the media can also help us publicize what we're doing as government, as private sector, as civil society, to inform what's happening. So the state of the environment is informed by the media. So the media is very helpful, but the media can also transmit what scientists cannot, give out to the population. The media is able to come up with a communication language and give it out to the population. The media is the data bank for the population. So, and the data bank or information are very important for biodiversity conservation. Okay, so that the society is empowered. Now, it's true. I've not had a lot of experience to other ESC countries with due respect to those ones I've not mentioned, but I can mention Kenya. If I can compare and contrast the way the Rio Convention and other MEAs are being managed in Uganda and Kenya, I must say Kenya is ahead of Uganda, because apart from Kenya having those focal points, you get in the midst there's a functional unit that is connecting all the mayors. You see, at the same time in Endemic, Kenya, there's a fully fledged department that is also connecting all the mayors. So there's some element of coordination in Kenya. In Uganda, of course, the focal points are still in the various ministries and agencies, but the Ministry of Water and Environment has made some attempts to also create the unit responsible for mayors, but it is not very functional. So we need to maybe borrow learn lessons from other ESC countries and see how we can do it. So this regional integration begins from national perspective. So we need to begin from at national level, then we move. But the issue is we need to start, because if we don't start, we shall never start. So we need to learn from other countries. So the coordination in terms of placement, in terms of information networking, in terms of planning and reporting and implementation, in terms of resource mobilization, we are still torn apart. At a global level, already there's discussion. For example, why do we talk more of climate change and therefore more resources going for climate change? And yet the CBD, where ecosystems that influence climate, and the climate affects most of the ecosystems and the human. The two need to talk together, and we have common conduit for delivery. So the same should come to the East African Community Bloc and other blocks too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, for those very detailed and clear responses. Colleagues, it's still open to questions, comments. Feel free to raise your hand, and then we'll give you a chance as we head towards the end of our session today. Okay, so I'll go ahead and nudge a few colleagues here to say something. First, we have Gabriel Nimenya from Bujumbura in Burundi. Gabriel, if you can get me, if you would like to make any comments, the floor is open for you. Looks like Gabriel has issues with his audio. Heche Suguta in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Welcome, and Any comments? Any questions? I guess silence means we are good to go. Dr. Godwin Opinde, who is my colleague at ECI. Any questions, comments?
Thanks, Jerry, for this opportunity. I think it's more of a comment on issues of the focal point coordination. As much as Fred has alluded to the fact that some countries have the systems in place. Now, the big question is, what would be the other reasons as to why, or what would be affecting their functionality? Because as you said, there are those critical management issues that actually bedeviling the institutions. So maybe if you would talk a little about that, Fred.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Godwin. And this is a very good intervention. You see, in most developing countries, the LDCs, those who participate in the convention, you realize that most of us believe that ratifying a convention is good enough by staying back. I believe, as a negotiator and as a government implementer, I don't believe that ratifying a convention should make us proud that we are in for it. It's more of domesticating it. And we domesticate the conventions through policy frameworks, legal regimes. We know we have got a number of regulations that have come. For example, UNEP has been supporting a number of countries in the review of regulations on waste and chemicals, and even biodiversity, like ABS, in the case of Uganda. So we find that, yes, the failures are one, we don't effectively domesticate the MEAs through policies, laws, and institutions. Institutions, I mean now, centrally managed institutions. That's one. Two, in terms of planning, therefore, we don't have any joint planning management mechanisms for this MEAs. All of them, we are working individually in terms of planning. Therefore, that means we also mobilize resources individually. We have individual projects, programs and projects. So in terms of planning and management, again, we are failing. In terms of governance, how far are the leaders committed politically, in terms of leadership, are they committed to prioritize these MEAs in the national development frameworks, the national development plans, the national visions, the sector strategies, and other plans and policies? How far are they committed? Do we carry on with what when we go for COPs, when we get back home, what do? We make commitments during COPs, but when we get back as leaders, what do? Do we commit this task? Do we commit this? Do we make this commitment part of the national planning and political leadership system? So from leadership to managers, there's a problem in commitment, apart from having them ratified. So in a nutshell, we should be able to domesticate, we should be able to plan and manage them in terms of policies, laws, plans, programs, and projects. And therefore, we should have institutions that are centrally coordinated to manage them. If we don't bring that kind of membrane in place, then we shall remain on book of UN system that we have actually ratified, but we remain dependent on support from external support. So most of the MEAs are external supported, which is not sustainable. So if ESC as a block could take a niche in that, and within the RBSA, we could take that and say maybe distribute our focus. Even the shared transparent ecosystem management approach, we look at the MEAs. Because if you look at the MEAs for biodiversity, for climate change, for soils, you talk about the shared ecosystems. If you talk about the chemicals and the waste, they're all about transparent movements of chemicals in the waste. So these are all shared responsibilities. So I don't think we should look at individual states so much. Let's look at ESC. Biodiversity has got no boundary. The boundary is ecological, is not political. And since it's ecological, it's limited by the physiographic characteristics of East Africa, which we have already mentioned. That from the coast to the mountains, there are various biodiversity companies, but they cut across. And because of the threats, by the way, we are losing the connectivity. Because I can assure you biodiversity are interconnected in terms of ecological systems. But because of the threats, we are losing the connectivity. And therefore, I believe the transparent and shared ecosystem approach will be the best. And we can do that if we focus on the MEAs. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, for that. Just a follow-up question, because you did mention in your presentation about the draft RBSAP, the Regional Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. And the elephant in the room is how can we make these opinion shapers be committed and for us to achieve I mean, in terms of implementation, issues of biodiversity. So in your RBSAP, or the Regional Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan, what are some of maybe a strategy to try and address this gap that you have actually put out clearly in terms of leadership? What are some of the strategies?
Okay, of course, I didn't have the power to elaborate on the draft document, because at the moment it's an in-house document. But what I can say that in terms of political and political and leadership ownership, first of all, it is a process that has been endorsed by the Council of Ministers, okay, at ESC level. And we expect the Council of Ministers to review it in November. I'm not sure, I'm not on the ground on the progress with the ESC Secretariat, but what I know that it has got a political blessing and to be approved by the Council of Ministers for implementation by their member states. So some of the strategies within the biodiversity one is ensure that we implement what is in the treaty. I told about the Article 111, Article 112 and 114. So talk about integration. It's talk about mainstreaming. It's talk about the shared transparent ecosystem management. It's talk about the shared resource mobilization strategies. That's joint resource mobilization. It's talk about joint capacity building programs. Now, capacity programs is not only a technical capacity program. Capacity program is going to cut across from the leaders themselves, bring the leaders on board. We're going to have policy dialogue. We're going to have the leaders forum on biodiversity and ecosystems within the strategy, meaning that the leaders are going to be involved in the implementation and they're also beneficiaries of the implementation at the same time. So there are a number of strategies that are meant to bring the ESC leadership together. And once the leadership can own the RBSAP, then we are able to implement it. I think that is what I can say.
Thanks very much, Fred. I would just want to pick on one other item that you mentioned about, going beyond ratification to getting to, actual implementation through national policy and law. And at this point, if Mr. Robert Orina is in, I would just like to hear from you on Kenya's experience in terms of joint implementation and enforcement of legislations or regulations that are related to biodiversity. How does it happen in Kenya, for example, where we have NEMA, we have Kenya Wildlife Service, Kenya Forest Service as independent institutions? How do you then work with them jointly to ensure seamless implementation and enforcement? So looks like Ms. Torina is not there, but I would throw back that question to you, Fred, from NEMA, Uganda's experience. How do you, for example, work as NEMA jointly with the National Forest Authority in Uganda and as well as the Wildlife Authority?
Yes, thank you. In Uganda, I'm going to give the experience of how we developed the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, the NBSAP. We have got a national task force. This is the national task force that is connected by NEMA Uganda. It includes all these ministries, the academia, the civil society, like Wild Conservation Society, and then of course the local NGOs. So this is a team of technical people, technical officers in these various organizations and entities, and we work for a common goal. One is to planning, for example, when we're developing strategies for the NBSAP, which have been mainstreamed into the National Development Plan. So the planning is done jointly, and the NEMA coordinates that. And this is done, of course, NEMA has facilitated the process, and the technocrats work together and they deliver whatever, whether it is the policy, whether it is about programs or about projects, work together. But also in Uganda, we have got what we call the joint sector review programs, where sectors come together and have their programs reviewed. And the NEMA is a member in all these sector reviews. There are a number of sector review programs in the country. Well, and the NEMA participates. So NEMA make sure that biodiversity issues are mainstream into the national development planning process. NEMA is part of the national development planning team that reviews and comes with a new development plan that takes to account all the MEAs, especially the MEAs that concern biodiversity, chemicals, and waste. So somehow we have got some structured way of working together. But of course, I also told you, this structured way is not institutionalized. It's not an institution that's working together. It's just individuals who have come and they're working together. So this is some level of cooperation and technical and scientific cooperation within Uganda to deliver.
Thank you very much, Fred. And Joyce Imende from NEMA, I noticed your hand was up as well on this point. So I would like to give you this opportunity to just give your comments, your response.
Good afternoon all. On matters of biodiversity as pertains to NEMA Kenya, mostly we are coordinated with the Ministry of Environment that it is able to coordinate other lead agencies who are working with biodiversity matters, and from that we can always have a way forward.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And just to be a little more specific, are there mechanisms for like joint enforcement actions? Like, do you, for example, conduct joint inspections with the different agencies that have a bearing on biodiversity and ecosystems?
No, we don't have such mechanisms. Maybe it's something to have a second thought about it. If I narrow down to maybe the implementation of Nagoya, you find NEMA is at the tail end where we issue access permit. We have KWS, KFS in the middle, who are the providers. Then we have at the entry point, we have NACOSTI. So you find mostly when it comes to inspection, I'll just do compliance and monitoring as pertains to the conditions issued from our permit. But now from the other end, we have not had much, though through other partnerships like UNDP, we have had capacity building jointly in terms of KWS, NEMA, KFS, now targeting a particular community on matters of biodiversity.
Thanks very much. So I believe that would be something to pick up and try and build on to ensure better synergies between the various institutions. So colleagues, if there are no further comments and questions, then allow me to thank our speakers for today. First of all, Mr. David Ongare, Director Compliance and Enforcement NEMA, for agreeing to grace our event and give us the opening speech. And secondly, very grateful to Mr. Fred Onyai, NEMA Uganda, for sharing his insights and experiences on this subject. To you all participants for being sharing your time for this and actively participating and sharing your insights as well. As I mentioned earlier, this is part of a series that we've been engaging on since last year. And just before I conclude, I noticed that I may not have seen Heche Suguta's hand from Tanzania. So Mr. Heche, from National Environment Management Council in Dar es Salaam, please go ahead and just share your comments, questions before I close this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bondo. I think you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. How is Dar es Salaam?
Yeah, thank you. Dar es Salaam is good. The weather today is literally not bad. So it's not hot. We are enjoying it here. Thank you very much, everyone. And sorry that I was late to join, but I followed both of the presentation. And maybe I can share the experience from.
Yes, please go ahead. Well, it looks like his network is not stable, so we'll not be able to hear him. But nevertheless, colleagues, as I was saying, this has been part of a series of capacity building webinars that we've been holding since last year. For the East Africa Network for Environmental Compliance and Enforcement, over the next 5 years, the focus areas are around the areas of air quality and climate change, biodiversity and ecosystems, and finally waste management and chemicals. And so today was focusing on the second strategic area, biodiversity and ecosystems. I would like to extend an invitation here, and a link and more details will be sent out to you for one other webinar happening next week on Tuesday at 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. once again, East Africa time. This time around, we are focusing on the subject of waste. And in particular, we will be looking at the subject of extended producer responsibility as a policy tool for waste management with a specific focus on plastics waste. So please look out for that and feel free to join once again. So I would like to thank you all for taking your time. And as always, we shall continue doing this collaboratively with the various environmental management agencies across East Africa, together with stakeholders from private sector, fellow NGOs like ourselves, our partners, UNEP. Jacqueline was here earlier, but looks like she had to take off to another meeting. But nevertheless, we thank you very much. And with this, I would like to bring the meeting to an end and wish you a great day ahead. Thank you very much and have a good day.